So let's look more closely at the future role for nuclear energy with our guest panellists today. Ben Ayliffe, senior nuclear activist at Greenpeace, and Angus McCrone, Bloomberg's chief editor for New Energy Finance. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for joining us. Angus, I'll start with you first. Is Chancellor Angela Merkel's tax on energy companies the right way forward as part of the drive to switch to renewable energy?
Well, Germany's doing sort of a number of different things on nuclear. There's a tax thing, but there's also the prolonging the life of reactors, and it's part of a sort of overall energy strategy, and it's already been one of the most successful countries in terms of implementing renewable energy. So it's about getting the mix right and getting emissions down over the long term.
Ben, more than 40 German businesses, as we were hearing there in Philippense's report, were warning that this new tax actually threatens future investments in greener forms of energy. Could the tax actually end up backfiring, being more counterproductive?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the German renewable industry has done very, very well over the past few years, and I think it's certainly a shining example to the UK. I mean, I have to say, I think it's a bit strange to hear the nuclear industry bellyaching about paying a few extra taxes when you consider the vast public handouts they've had from day one, really. So it does seem a bit rich to me.
Angus, how much of an impact is this going to have on nuclear energy companies?
Well, I think it's something that'll give them pause for thought, and one of the problems with nuclear, which we're seeing in the UK as well, is that it is a technology that has very large upfront capital costs and also planning issues and so on, and it can easily be delayed, and the start of new projects and so on can be knocked back. So the more uncertainties there are, the more an industry like nuclear gets affected.
But I guess many of these companies would still be left with a high profit margin from these plants, wouldn't they?
Yes, possibly, although that depends on the price of electricity and demand and supply over the next decade or two.
And Ben, under this plan, Germany's 70 nuclear reactors should stop functioning in 12 years' time to be replaced by green energy such as wind, water, solar power. Does that plan sound realistic to you?
Yeah, certainly, I think it is. I mean, as I said before, the German renewable industry really has been a shining example, and I think that there is a sort of a belief within certain parts of the industry that if we don't have nuclear, then we're not going to meet our climate change targets. We're going to have looming energy gaps. But I think actually focusing on things like demand reduction, maximising the use of clean energy like renewables, making a more flexible, decentralised energy system really is the way to go, and it can reap vast rewards in terms of green-collar jobs, new technologies. So it's never a choice between just nuclear and sort of looming chaos at all.
Well, I've got slightly different point of view. We don't have a sort of enormous attachment to nuclear as opposed to other technologies, but we do see it as part of the low-carbon answer for certainly the next 20 years or so. For instance, the IEA, the International Energy Agency, in its forecasts, even on its sort of base case scenario, which wouldn't see carbon emission falling, reckon there's going to have to be another 100 gigawatts of nuclear built worldwide over the next 20 years. And if we really want to see serious reductions in emissions, then we're going to have to see nuclear capacity worldwide double. And that's along with a lot of renewable investment. So we see it as part of the picture.
Ben, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I think, certainly looking at the UK, the government's own advisors have said that even if somehow the UK industry managed to get 10 reactors built, we'd only cut our carbon emissions by about 4% sometime after 2020. And given the incredible uncertainties and the unknowns that exist around new nuclear, the financing, the back-end waste and decommissioning costs, the clear steer I think we need to get from government is to increase things like demand reduction, maximise the use of renewables. If we do that, we can cut any looming energy gap and make deep cuts in our carbon emissions without the need for new nuclear, because it is such a relatively small carbon impact you're going to get from building these things, coupled with the huge costs and uncertainties around timetables, that betting the house on nuclear or assuming that it's going to play a major role in a future energy mix, I think is a big gamble.
Angus, your response?
Well, I don't think anybody's talking about betting the house, and we're certainly not doing that, but we do think there is going to be a real supply problem if we don't get a lot of capacity built in the UK, and there's probably going to need to be something like 60 gigawatts of extra capacity of different sorts built. And okay, yes, let's drive as much on energy efficiency, but it's not going to happen overnight, and new capacity will have to be built nuclear is, in terms of cost, is somewhere between gas and coal and
so
onshore wind.
So
it's more expensive. It's more expensive than fossil fuel, excluding the carbon cost, but it's cheaper at the moment, at least, than things like offshore wind. So we need to drive with offshore wind, but also we need some new nuclear as well.
Ben, what do you make of that actually nuclear is cheaper than some of these newer technologies, and the fact that it's actually very reliable? Nuclear power generates a high amount of electrical energy in a single plant. It gets the job done very quickly in 10 seconds.
Well, nuclear doesn't necessarily. The UK reactor fleet is creaking up. Sizewell B is offline. I mean, betting the house is not a good idea, I'm afraid.
Good stuff. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us.